Here's a big question, and you've probably all been asked this question before. If you throw a rock in the pond or in the lake, does it really impact the other side? Well, today with data, we're going to show you how it's a pretty big rock, but how one big rock can be a complete annihilation tsunami on the other side.
Exactly.
To the HPLS podcast. Live, relevant, and high performance information, conversations, and education weekly. So, I mean, this is a topic that is, I love this topic, Dean, because it's the one that is a constant in our business, right? Something happens here, there's a huge impact over here. You know, something happens here, the tsunami hits on the other side. Something happens in LA, there's a tsunami in Memphis. You know what I mean? And it's actually, you know, a lot along the lines when a tsunami happens in like Florida and stuff, it sucks all the trucks for FEMA and all that kind of stuff. So there's all this.
Well, I'll tell you the way you introed that, I was instantly thinking, because you said it's like a rock, and I was thinking it's kind of like, especially what's going on recently, it's kind of like an asteroid just hitting the water. Forget a rock. This is an asteroid. Just
but DJ, when you think about the actual act that we're going to talk about, it was actually a rock. Because when you think about the volume of trucks compared to how many were involved, it's kind of like a pebble. But that pebble created this tsunami on the other side. And everybody's probably going, what the hell are they talking about? So it's something that y'all heard about, but we actually have data about it now that Dean's going to share to really hopefully solidify when one thing happens, there could be astronomical follow-up. And I guess, Dean, a real good thought of this was the polar vortex. Was it last year or the year before?
Last year, February 23,
right? In Texas, where it just swept through and everything froze. I mean, so that tsunami down there, right, or that rock down there, created a tsunami up here. And I could speak to one level of it, which was pools, right? Everybody's pool pumps froze, everybody's pipes froze, everything. In Canada, there was a point in time where you could not find a pool pump. You could not find a filter system. You could barely find pipe because we were shipping it all to Texas. So they could rebuild. And it's funny because we were sitting here and we had people come in that were quoting our pool before we ended up doing it. And we were talking to them. They're like, well, you know, typically a kit is like 4 days. It's now 6 to 9 weeks if we get it. And we're like, what do you mean? They're like, well, they're shipping a lot of stuff to Texas because a lot of the gunite has cracked and everything. And people are saying, well, I want to go to a panel pool. And he goes like the pool kits, the pumps, even like the PVC and the what's called Tiger Flex pipe. All of it was being shipped down. So one act of weather that was catastrophic, don't get me wrong, but the act of weather, you know, where I sit 3,800 miles away is impacting an entire country, because it wasn't just Ontario, it was Canada who only has this season. You know, I know guys that put $10,000 deposit down and they still don't have a pool kit.
Wow.
From last year. And they put it down in 2020. So like they made the deposit in the fall of 2020, the summer of 2021 came around because of the polar vortex that went through Texas. It backed everything up. Like there's pool companies up here that are booked till 2024 now, just because they lost like another year's productivity. Right. I mean, it was crazy.
Dan, we've had a couple of events this week alone. I mean, think about the COVID shutdown in China's largest, wealthiest city in Shanghai. It's their biggest port. I read an interesting article yesterday that was kind of hypothesizing that it's somewhat deliberate to try and increase our dependency on China, which I thought was a really interesting take on it, because I'm not sure that's the case, but it was just an interesting angle. Our dependency on China is unbelievable at the moment. So think about shippers and importers, and go back to our story from last year about your bed sheets trying to come in from China to end up in Orlando. Think about shippers now that are already pre-planning, pulling forward Christmas and fall inventories now So think about high inflation, warehouse inventory holding costs. Think about our normal seasonal peak in truckload shipping in October for Christmas retail season. And then on the rail side, it's more like September because it's a longer lead time. Well, we'd heard from the Port of Los Angeles last year that pull forward that normally happens in September happened in June last year. So it completely flattened our peaks that we normally see seasonally. And now they're even talking about, because of what's going on overseas and the impact of this, pulling forward volumes even sooner. So I think on the global side, we're a long way from being out of this in terms of supply chain disruptions. For those of you on the show that are thinking about working with shippers, bringing freight in, more volatility around port markets, and then think about the big rock that was thrown in the pond on the other side of Canada in British Columbia in December with the floods. And those floods shut down a lot of the Class 1 railroads, CPCN in particular. And if you think about our show, I just looked at some rates here. Seattle, Chicago. So remember, Chicago is where about 30% of all containers end up. 6 of the Class 1 railroads end up in Chicago, a landlocked city.
Say that again, because that is a number that I think is astronomical.
It's bizarre.
30%.
It is bizarre. So 30% of all intermodal container moves just sort of end up in Chicago before they're sent to other parts of the country. Somewhere between 25 and 30%.
What would that? Do you know what that would entail from a volume perspective?
Well,
I think it would be astronomical.
Well, we saw it. We saw it when the landlocked rail yards started to get into trouble. From a space perspective, there was a great story by Paul Berger on Wall Street Journal. You should listen to the podcast on the Journal. He was talking. He went and visited the ports in Los Angeles and did a tour of the Houston yard, the big port there. And it was just fascinating how the guy that runs that port was talking about we physically had no space to put loaded containers off a ship or even bring empty ones in. We had no space. We were renting other space in other areas to try and increase our capacity. Well, think about landlocked rail yards where a lot of intermodal volume comes in. Truckload competes heavily with intermodal on the long haul. So that's why that story emerged late last year. They had 23 miles of trains backed up in sidings trying to get into Chicago. And then they shut down the rail service for a week from Los Angeles to Chicago. Remember all of that was going on?
Yeah, so to upload the backlog, to get rid of the backlog.
So this the corollary of the story is you've really got to be aware of what's going on both globally and, I've always said, watch the weather. Like the weather is probably one of the most important things you've got to watch in freight, because back in December, spot rates for truckloads, so when the rails got into trouble, spot rates from Seattle to Chicago hit $2.58 in December. They're now down to $1.71. So the weather hit, everything backed up. Trucks could move. So rates have dropped. What's that? 258 down to 171. So rates have come back down to where they are normally. But it just shows you that how weather can impact more fixed networks like trains and planes. Trains in particular, but trucks, because they're so easy to move in any direction, they're not fixed. They're not on a fixed network. They were able to pick up a lot of that capacity. So where we're trying to get to here is the Canadian blockades in February, of course, and that rock really upset the freight market on the cross-border traffic side.
Definitely
huge. I've also noticed on a spot market perspective, anything mountainous in the wintertime, the rates go up. It's funny because I don't know if you've watched the show. DJ and I had a good friend of mine, Andrew, that used to run heavy haul through the mountains, and he was saying, Dan, 65% of the drivers come through have no idea what they're doing. He goes, the state troopers will stop them before they hit the mountain range and say, okay, chain up your tires. He goes, some of them sit there for days because they don't even know how to chain their tires properly. And he goes,
Highway Through Hell.
Sunday.
Speaking of weather and events, I mean, just recently, obviously, thoughts and prayers to. Did you guys see the accident on 81? That it's still. I seen there, it's still closed now.
So I came home through that storm from Louisville last week from Mid America Truck Show. I came home in my truck up 71 across 90, and that storm hit me Saturday night. So and the flip side of the story is I'd spent the best part of 2 weeks polishing, shining, buffing, waxing, spent a lot of money to get my truck ready. Within 5 hours of leaving the truck show, I'm in a snowstorm. and this calcium mixed with snow that they use to treat the roads is caked on my truck still today, like a pancake mix. It's unbelievable. But the accidents, guys, I was absolutely floored. I had my dash cam running, and this was like 4 a.m. when I got rolling, and it was still snowing pretty heavily, and they hadn't plowed much of the road up 71 through 90. You got that lake effect snow belting everybody. I was kind of just sitting in the lane that was plowed, and I'm probably doing 45, 50 miles an hour, just taking it very easy, very careful, because I'm bobtail. Yeah. There were loaded trucks going past me at 70 miles an hour, at least in the unplowed lane. And I was just amazed. Now, I've been in situations where loads are urgent and you've got to get stuff delivered, but that was madness. And I just can't think for the life of me how you would think you could have traction in those conditions. Now, no one had a wreck, but of course, when you get that whiteout, DJ, like in Pennsylvania, that snow squall, you just lose visibility in an instant. So, yeah, there's lots of chaos going on this time of the year. That's for sure.
Yeah, because it's these freak storms. I remember one time we went to one of my daughter's hockey tournaments, and it was like literally you lose the car in front of you, 60, 80 feet ahead of you. And it was, I was like right at that break where I would lose the car or not. And I kind of just looked at my wife and I said, here's the reality. Yeah. If that car goes in the ditch, we are following them. Like it's just what it is.
And unfortunately, I seen some of the video, and that's exactly what it was like. They were just driving into an abyss, like they had no clue.
Yeah, to your point about mountains, right? So heavy haul guys, so in winter the miles are harder, right? The miles are slower, they're harder. You have more downtime. You've got all the chaining up that goes on, but you've also got fewer roads open, right? So a lot of those mountainous roads, you've got less access. So that there's an extra mileage component to it. Everything just gets harder in winter. Chains, straps, everything's frozen. So everything slows down, but we're getting a little bit more fluidity in the market in a bizarre way. And of course, if only someone had predicted this on this show, we'd be all better off. But the driver shortage is all but gone. I don't know if you've been hearing many stories about it.
Yeah.
Of course, trucks are moving through freight networks much faster now. The demand has eased off, and we've got more labour coming back to the labour-starved warehouses. Spot rates are plummeting because we've always had enough trucks to move the freight. It's just that they were sitting on docks way too long when the labour shortage was hitting the warehouse side of the industry. So as you've got the combination of demand increasing, truck movement through networks increasing, and that means that you've got capacity easing as demand decreases, as it normally does in the first quarter. So spot rates have dropped 31 cents a mile in the last month for dry van here in the US. Dan, they're down dry van down another 5 cents this week. So they were down 5 cents last week. They're down another 5 cents as of today. Reefer's down 7. We've gone from
so they're dropping.
260. Absolutely.
But here's where
plummeting.
Here's where we're going to run into that bloodbath theme that we've been talking about.
Exactly.
It's the flip side.
Yes,
this is where our listeners are saying, well, shippers could easily now take advantage of falling rates in the spot market. And of course, that's a race to the bottom because then carriers exit, capacity tightens, rates go back up again. So you've got to remember we talked on the show before Christmas about, people have very good memories. Work with shippers that have got good memories because they'll remember how tight capacity was in the last year. This is a time to remember that you can't chase the market down and still think you'll have trucks in the market in 6 months' time because the boom and bust cycle is going to be pretty devastating, I think, this time around.
And this was where shippers also, and it's putting yourself in their shoes, it's a tough conversation, right? Because of how much their costs have increased, like you said, the forward march to bring stuff in forward. So now there's, if we just go back to Greg, he when he was on the show, he's like, Dan, I have 1.6 million square feet of warehouse space I didn't have in 2020. So there's like $2.3 million in monthly spend just on warehouse space. Right. Nothing more is being sold, but you're having this increased cost. And now your freight rates are coming down. Like most shippers want to jump on that like right away to reduce their costs.
Yeah.
And
that
education piece I think is missing for some of them because listen, some of them, like if we go back to my client with bed sheets, his margin was $7,000 a container when it was $3,400 a container. Right. And when his dray cost was $350, $400, and when he had to warehouse it for a month. Now he's brought like dozens of containers in. So he's got millions of dollars in extra product he's already paid for to leave China. Then it sits, in California. I was speaking to a student the other day, and they were almost 3.5 months to get their container from a truck, from a ship in California. And he goes, I don't know whether it was the ship or whether it was the warehouse or what. He goes, but it was almost 3.5 months before I got it to my customer from when they ordered it. So you have that major output of cash, that increase in ocean, then the delay. You're ordering almost 5 months in advance because you're 31 days on the water just from Asia. So, you start taking that timeline into consideration, Dean, from what the data says. Are we going to now, you look at, capacity's eased off. Now, all of a sudden with Shanghai and everything happening, when Shanghai opens, now there's just going to be this massive influx to pop to get stuff because the warehouses are going to be down. I was on the phone with a gentleman yesterday from Arkansas. He says like Walmart hasn't had toilet paper on the shelf for like a week. Because it's just, he goes, I don't know what it is. He goes, and then one day it'll be like the aisles will be packed, and the next day they got nothing. And he's, so that wave is still coming. I think that big tidal wave is still coming because now you got Shanghai, then you got all these other things happening, and it's just going to create that new.
Well, don't forget the West Coast Labor Agreement in July. They've got to renegotiate that. So right now you've got shippers thinking, they're paying 5 times to bring that 40-foot container in. It's on the FBX Freightos FBX index today. It's at 15,889. So call it
$16,899 to bring
89 to bring in that's China to the east coast, west coast of the US. So it's 5 times what you would normally be, maybe more. So right now, if you think this is what shippers are doing, and this is why the Journal podcast was so good by Paul Berger, was talking about shippers that he's talking to are already figuring, how do I avoid the West Coast? How do I avoid Los Angeles and Long Beach in the event that the labor talks go south? And of course, you've already got overloaded ports on the East Coast and along the Gulf Coast. So shippers don't have a lot of options. So for those that are tied to retail imports, you've got to work very closely with your shippers on multimodal options. How do I get truckload out of areas where, in port, where I bring freight into ports that aren't normal, truckload ports? There's a lot of stuff to still go on this year. Now, of course, imports are the biggest part of what moves, in the trucking industry. But in the port markets, it's an incredibly big part of it, like Elizabeth, New Jersey, Savannah, Los Angeles, Long Beach, Prince Rupert, Seattle, right? So those sort of port markets are ones where that tidal wave that's coming in, right, it'll see incredible volatility. We've gone from, in Los Angeles, 109 vessels down to 45 today, waiting to unload. So the market is eased, right? It's eased incredibly. So our because the truckload volumes are now being met by the contractual committed modes, rail and road, there's not as much flowing over to the spot market. So that means
Dean,
there's more
can
capacity.
I ask you a question on that?
Yep.
So you went from 109 down to 45, but would that not have something to do with Asia being shut down and things not being able to leave, like when there were sections of
So this is normal.
So it's not necessarily the demand has gone; it's just for the ships
Well,
are
and then
slower to come in.
then, like
because
you
of
said,
what's
though, Dan,
happening.
as soon as it opens, here comes the flood again.
So here's the flip side: imports are down 11% year over year as of February, right? So we've got fewer imports coming in, but that's normal because Chinese New Year celebrations at the start of February, 3 weeks shutdown of factories, volumes drop.
Exactly.
So that the Journal of Commerce was reporting last week that volumes are going to increase now through the rest of the year. So, but where we started the show was we're going to see a pretty steep increase in volume coming in sooner than later. So that's where you need to be planning with your shippers now how to move that volume. If they're looking to bring inventory in forward, where are they going to store it? What are the inventory holding costs? How do I get trucks to move it? All those sorts of things are going to be really big issues to deal with. So
let's dive into the
let me just the data.
See if I can.
Well,
because I mean, I think this has. So we're going back to the blockades in Canada when individuals and truckers blocked the borders.
Yep.
Right. So we'll start there, Dean.
Yep. Okay. So this data comes from our sister company in Canada, LoadLink. It's part of the Roper Technologies company. You can find them on the New York Stock Exchange under ROP. They're a Fortune 1000 company. LoadLink in Canada, our sister company, they have a freight index comprises of roughly 7,000 Canadian carriers and brokers. So the data also includes a lot of cross-border and domestic volumes. You can find it on their website under their news section, but the data was kind of just mind-blowing in terms of the impact of the blockades. Now, if you think back to our show we did when this was going on, one of the things we explained was that a lot of the cross-border trucking, and about 75% of LoadLink's volume is cross-border. And so that cross-border volume that was dedicated. You remember the example we gave of, Quebec City to Phoenix, right? So you don't leave Quebec City with a load to Phoenix unless you've got a load home already organized on the dock. So a lot of that, it's a very balanced, dedicated type cross-border activity. It hasn't traditionally been a lot of spot market activity because of the cabotage rules. You've got to load back across the border, right? So you can't just do loads intra-USA. So what that meant was in February, when you had fewer drivers coming south into the US, you had less capacity available to take those dedicated loads north. And that ripple effect has played out in the market ever since. So if you look at some of the data that we've got here on the screen, not sure which one you've got there.
Let me pull that up.
Yeah.
Because so what we'll do is we'll pull up the costing model first.
Yep. Yeah, so this shows that the number of loads moved. So you can see fewer trucks posting because there were fewer trucks interested in moving freight. But I think this was a 171% increase year over year. It's an all-time record level of loads moving. So this is spot market, right? So this is what happens when contracted carriers and shippers, capacity changes, demand increases. So who do they go to? So they went to the spot market and the LoadLink load board to try and find capacity, and that's why you saw the number of loads being posted goes through the roof.
And here's the thing that is like blowing my mind, Dean. Is if everyone looks to the right of their screen, the dotted line is trucks and the purple line is loads. So you look at the variance between trucks available and loads posting.
Yeah, they're going the opposite way too.
Oh, that's a recipe for massive cost increases, and it like massive cost increases, and it's crazy because there wasn't this gap of trucks at the protest. Right?
Yeah, this is a phenomenal thing. If I could quote you what the president of the company said, Claudia said, while capacity shrank across the board, the decline in cross-border equipment this month was much sharper than the typical drop in February. So there's some seasonality in February that we talked about because it's a quieter time of the quarter. We have never seen a decline of over 40% year over year. The blockades have had a significant impact on truck postings across the country, creating ripple effects across the market. So this data here is kind of the first chance we've had a look at what's happening north of the border. I've got some incredible rate data on south of the border heading back north. The market is still in turmoil. I would say that this market hasn't come back to normal just yet. There's something that's changed dramatically. Did you have one more chart, Dan? Was the loads index?
Yes, this one.
Yeah.
So this is the actual load index.
Yeah. So you can see February in 18, it came down flat in 19 and 20, a little bit of an uptick in last year. But this year it's through the roof in terms of the load index. Yeah. Just incredible data. There's a lot more data available at they've got a rate index also. They've got some pretty good data up there. If you wanted to know specifically, just go to loadlink.ca and get some data there. I'm interested in getting.
I also threw the chat. The link to that article for everyone, both in Facebook, YouTube, and
on YouTube and Facebook.
Yeah.
And I put it on LinkedIn as well. You can't post from LinkedIn on Restream, so I actually went to the LinkedIn.
Yeah, I think I threw it on mine too.
Yeah. So the flip side of this is, so obviously capacity tightened rapidly. What we said would happen happened, which was there were fewer trucks heading south into the US. That meant capacity tightened northbound. So remember we talked about of the 120 auto manufacturers in Canada, they had something like, it was 60 auto parts manufacturers had 120 warehouses in Mexico. Was how the number played out. So there's a lot of volume that moves back and forward cross border before a car rolls off the production line. I looked at what I called Auto Alley, which was Laredo to Toronto, where Laredo is your number one truck crossing port by far from Mexico into the US, and then up Auto Alley into Toronto. Spot market rates. So remember in the show we talked about this. The average all of last year for Laredo to Toronto on the spot market was about I'm going to call it $1.50, right? Up until December. January went to $1.70. February, $2.40. Today, $3.02.
Wow.
So it's almost double. So it's doubled.
How do you plan for that as a shipper though? Like as a this is the crazy thing, right? Like there's no ability to plan. And I mean, every company we spoke to, 2022 is all about making a profit, is all about making a profit. You can't in that market. Like and we're only talking parts. Doubled. And a lot of these parts come up raw. They get powder coated or they get sprayed, and then they go back to a factory to get installed. Like if you look at all the Magna facilities up in Newmarket and all this kind of stuff, or if you look at the way the movements happen, a door, the steel comes up or it goes to Mexico, it gets stamped, and then it comes up and gets painted, then it moves back to Mission to get installed. Like there is a lot more movement than just Mexico, Canada. Like there's probably 3 or 4 more movements inside of there. And if your price is double for one, theoretically, or maybe not. No, you can't really say that in this market. Theoretically doesn't work. So let's say you're even paying half as another 50% on the other rates.
Crazy.
Your cost per unit, if it was $1, is now close to $3, $2.50.
Even contract rates are up $1 a mile.
And now, Dean, you said that was a spot market, and it went from so it went from $1.70 in January to now it's over $3. Is that what you said?
Yep, 302. Yep. Today, that's the last 7-day rolling average. So capacity is very tight northbound into Toronto. Now, so when you come out of Laredo, right, you've got to run across the border. If you've got a Canadian load on, you've got to go all the way into Canada.
Yeah.
Unless of course you're doing that cross-border deal or that sort of that hustle you do around Buffalo. But so the other lane that I looked at this morning was, of course, the big one, Toronto, Detroit, and return. It's nuts. So it was like 580. I'll call it 600 as an average load rate all of last year. It's at $1,202 per load today. I think that's about $5.20 a mile if my math's right. So that's Toronto to Detroit. In the other direction, it's even more fascinating. It's at $1,222. So it's about $1,200 both ways from Detroit to Toronto, Toronto back to Detroit on auto parts. That's like double. That's double where it was all of last year. So capacity has tightened dramatically in the cross-border market. It's hard to know exactly how many drivers there aren't crossing the border, but clearly that February protest had a profound impact on freight markets, which gets back to the tsunami and dropping rocks and stones, and that's a great analogy because we call it sort of the domino economy, where dominoes just keep falling. Some are related, some are sort of tangentially off to the side, but they're still getting knocked over. And it looks like we're in for another year of that. We're a ways from having this supply chain stabilize. Even though the pandemic is we're on the tail end of the pandemic in terms of disruptions, there's a lot of normality coming back. So I think we could, you should be able to say with confidence that we'll go back to spending more on services this summer, less on physical goods. That looks like being the case from a travel perspective when you talk to airlines. So things are pretty good there. Although high fuel prices are starting to crimp some of the airline costs, which could put an impact on prices. So lots of things going on in the market right now. I think the message I would be leaving with people on the phone that are talking about buying capacity and working with shippers is to go back to just work with people that have got good memories, right? Make sure if they're forgetful, remind them that they can't chase the market down because that capacity will evaporate in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Because
just
diesel
be very
costs.
Careful. Just got to be careful.
Well, so profitability margins for a carrier have dropped 75% in 4 weeks. With diesel up well over $1 per gallon, rates down as much. They've gone from making carriers have gone from making 55 cents a mile gross profit this time last year to 13 cents per mile. So profitability has dropped 77% in a week. Gross profit. Operating
you got to
costs
think about that. If a carrier's operating at 96% or 95% or 94%, that's not a big margin.
Well, these are small carriers, right? These are small carriers who make up the bulk of the industry in the spot market, right? So diesel's gone up so much. So diesel's gone up like $33,000 to run a single truck. Rates have only gone up $8,000, right? So they've had a great 2021, but in the last month, their profitability has absolutely been hammered. And that's where you're going to see a lot of the pain is in the small carrier. Now, they're still making a profit margin, but it's gone from 55 cents a mile to 13. So their margins are being eroded dramatically, and diesel went up 5 cents this week.
It's funny this topic comes up because I didn't think we were going to get into it, but so I've now I know you guys probably have heard I've ordered like 3 vehicles in the last year and a half, hoping that one is going to come in. So 2 have come in. So the Mustang Mach-E GT and my Ford F-150 have come in, and I'm looking at the 2 leases, right, that I'm going to go into, one of the 2, and it's funny because the numbers come to $8,032.92 different. So the Mustang Mach-E is obviously, it's the GT one, so it's the highest edition, but it does, 0 to 60 in 3 point something seconds. So it's really on my list. But here's the thing: is we sat down yesterday, and I was showing my wife some of the numbers, and I said, like, here's the difference. Okay, so electric, no fuel. Yep. We have a charging station in the garage. Basically, we're about $0.015 to charge per so if it's 100 watt battery, it's going to be $0.015 times 100, right? So when you look at like to fill it kind of thing, it's pennies on the dollar. So that 8,032, I now start doing how many kilometers I run at 15.7 liters per 100 kilometers, what it consumes, the truck consumes. And I'm figuring out if I spend less than $630 a month on fuel, I'm better to go with the truck, because when you look at the payments versus fuel, right? And it's funny because it's friggin' close just because of the price of fuel. So based on how many kilometers I do, like my vehicle is the family vehicle, and so anytime we go anywhere, I'm driving. And based on my kilometers, based on 15.7, so again, city, highway, blah, blah, blah. But it's actually because of the price of fuel, it's actually close, which is crazy to think that we spend almost $8,000 a month, a year on fuel. Like, to me, but if fuel was 20 cents a liter cheaper, what it was X amount of time ago, it would be a no brainer, because I'd be like, well, there's no way I'm spending, what am I going to do? Like 7 tanks of fuel in a month? Never going to happen. So, but it's funny because when I was working in the city, I was doing like 220 kilometers a day.
Kilometers, right?
So that's where, when I got I had a SRT, a Charger SRT. So I was like 16.9 liters per 100 kilometers. And the 2.3 liters per 100 kilometers that the Fusion did actually made me $10,000 in the first year I bought the car. Like, I actually put $10,000 back in my bank account because I was spending so much on fuel, and then the government incentive of $6,000. So it's like this fuel conversation goes far beyond, like, we're looking at. And so our natural gas has gone up too. Why? I don't really
know. And that's where it brings in Nick from yesterday, and having him on that whole
and
we shut out Nick. But Dean, I don't know if you've seen that, but check into that.
So Nick Serbius, he's got a device that attaches to the truck, and he can give you 20% fuel savings. Huge. Oh. See. So yesterday, Dean, that was exactly what we talked about yesterday. I said to Nick yesterday, I go, Nick, that's one of those too good to be true kind of thing. And you're exactly, I mean, hey, DJ, did I call that or what? Like, your face, Dean, was like, really? And it's kind of in your head. You're like 20% fuel saving. And Nick was like, Dan, like, it is one of the tough, hey, DJ, yesterday he was like, dude, that is one of the toughest parts of this.
It happens. It's amazing.
I've got a computer setting that'll burn about 50% more fuel at the truck races. I've got that one dialed in. Hey, diesel was $6. Diesel was $6.19 a gallon at Barstow, California, on I-40 this morning. $6.19 a gallon. Like, so this is, and diesel went up this week, down last week, up this week. So this is why diesel is such a hot topic, because the retailers are going to be very slow to bring prices back down, even though wholesale prices are plummeting because of the volatility in the market. They don't know where the market's going longer term. So we're in for high fuel prices for another while, and it's going to really hurt a lot of carriers in the spot market. It's going to be tough sledding, to use a Canadian analogy.
Well, then you have that increase. So everything is going to increase in the store, and then everything increases for us. Right? I have some buddies that went up to Cochrane last weekend, and when the fuel conversation actually became a topic, where normally You never hear fuel as a in the world of snowmobiling, you would never normally hear fuel as a topic.
Right.
But I remember sitting down with my buddy and he goes, okay, it's going to be $840 in fuel at today's price. He goes, Lord knows when we get up 8.5 hours north, what the price is up there. He goes, but it's going to be $800 something. So you're sitting there and you're two people driving 8 hours north, 9 hours north to go snowmobiling for the weekend. It's like, okay, so premium that was at $1.80 is at $2.20. So now you're sitting here going, okay, we're going to burn through 5 tanks of fuel. So 5 tanks, so there's an extra $300 in fuel than we would normally pay, plus another $800 in fuel to get there. Just in fuel for snowmobiles and truck, without lodging, without anything. God forbid I hit a tree and break something, because I tend to do that a lot. You know, you're over $1,600. I'm like, yeah, I'm out. I'm like, you know what?
It cost me $1,800 to drive to Louisville and back last week for the truck show. $1,800.
And what would that have normally costed you?
Yeah,
I would have been lucky to spend $1,000 normally. Last time I went,
that impacts what people can do. It really impacts the whole staycation thing.
Well, fuel's up to about 40. I think on my operating spreadsheet for an owner operator, fuel's about 46% of operating costs today. So you know, it was like 46% of operating costs is diesel.
So the last time we looked at that, it was 36%. So it's gone up
10%. That's a different number. So this is fuel as a percentage of your total operating cost. Fuel as a percentage of revenue. That's more frightening, right? So that's the number. Remember, it's got to be at 25% to be profitable long term. The spot rates, national average spot rates at 238, diesel at 518. It's 37%.
So it's gone up even 1 more percent from our last conversation.
Yeah. So fuel as a percentage of revenue is 37% today for a single truck operator running 110,000 miles, 10,000 empty, and financing a truck. So remember, 2019 record bankruptcies, it was 32%, dropped to 20% during the 2020 when diesel was really low. It's gone from 20% to 37%. It's actually gone up like almost. It's gone from like something like 25%. It's gone up almost 10 points in 4 weeks. And that's territory that really crushes a lot of carriers that work on all-in rates in the spot market, where they have to pay retail at the pump, but they're not necessarily getting full cost recovery for the fuel surcharge. And the problem is that capacity is loosening. What we said would happen has happened. As the market, as labor came back to the warehouse side of the market, trucks started to move through networks faster. This illusion of tight capacity disappeared. We've got a lot more trucks in the market than we thought we had. We always had them. They just weren't cycling quick enough. Yeah. Now they're moving through the markets quick enough. We've got plenty of capacity. Demand comes down, diesel goes up. It's like one of those events that you probably thought is your worst case scenario. It's actually happening in front of our eyes right now. So it's going to be, I think that the difference though is some people have been like Chicken Little, right? The sky is falling in the media. And I don't subscribe to that, because carriers are still making money. Spot rates are still at very high levels. They've had a great financial year. I just hope that they realize that operating costs have gone up something like 50 cents a mile. Because I had someone in our company say rates are stupidly high. Well, rates aren't stupidly high if it's costing you $2 a mile to run a truck and spot rates are only $2.35. Mm-hmm. Right. So I think that what's missing in the discussion is a lot of people don't realize how much it's cost to run a truck, how much it's increased to run a truck, whether you're a large carrier or a small carrier.
Daman says it right here. Our trucks we're running approximately 15,000 per truck before. Now we're close to 23,000 per truck per month to run it.
There you go.
Like so that is a huge number.
So this is the education piece that you've got to work on. People have got to understand what it costs to run a truck.
That's exactly,
And you know what, Dean? That's one of the hardest education pieces. Sorry, let me rephrase. When I tried to share with a lot of shippers how expensive it is to actually run a truck, it was, the conversation was like almost staring at a deer in a headlight. It was like, I don't care. Just get my product from A to B. And I think that's changed a bit over the years, but it's a big piece. Everybody understanding. And not only that, brokers, you need to understand what it costs to run a truck, because when we're trying to, crack them down, I'll get it for $50 cheaper, get it for $100 cheaper, it's like, guys, you got to understand what the baseline is, because as much as, and I know the relationships, and there's a lot of talk about relationship, but new brokers coming in, it's about the margin, and they want the profit. And if they can, unfortunately, carriers still see it every day where loads get canceled on them because they got a better price. And vice versa. Don't get me wrong. Vice versa. Brokers get a lot of carriers cancel on because they get a better price. So it's not a, it's not a, are you on Chris Rock's side?
That's where the relationship is key. Relationship is key, for sure.
So,
all right.
Daman threw a few other things if you want to throw those.
I did.
I apologize, guys. We haven't been very good on the, actually, sorry, let me rephrase. I haven't been very good on the comments today. I apologize.
There's Trey Griggs. I did meet Trey at Matt's. G'day, Trey.
Yes.
Good morning, Trey.
Morning, fellas. Thanks for the link. You're very welcome, brother.
Thanks
Jeff,
for the data, Daman. That's good.
This includes carriers, warehouse operations, and getting everyone on the same page. It was a complete disaster the last time. We all paid for it as service providers and consumers. Absolutely.
That's a great point. Absolutely.
It's a great point because we're still paying for it.
We're still,
now we're looking at
still the ripple
inflation rates and all these other things that are happening.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Just as when Shanghai, Ningbo, and Shenzhen open their gates, and LA, Long Beach port spikes, how do we respond appropriately to reposition containers and chassis to handle the volume?
So
we cannot manage it
without proactive. Yeah. So I think that the journal podcast I listened to with Jeff Berger from Wall Street Journal, the thing that struck me was that next time this happens, a lot of those places have already leased a lot more space, a lot more pop-up yards. I think they have, I'm going to say, I hope they have more redundancy in terms of extra space. So I think that might be different this time, Jeff, is they've actually got more physical space to put all of these containers. I hope.
Okay. All right, DJ. We can't get it to 30 minutes. It's hilarious.
We're a little bit over, but I think it was a good topic. I think we got some good info.
Let's get at it
for y'all. Yeah. Obviously, anybody watching, talk to your suppliers. Make sure they know their cost. Make sure they're not doing a 2019 over again. But thank you, Dean, for joining us every Wednesday. Again, everybody, and all your comments, feedback, thank you. Monday through Friday, Sales Chatter Live. Start your day right with us, 9 a.m. till 9:30 Eastern Standard Time. If you want to get ahead of the game, start it here. Great quote to take us out is from Hillary Mason. Data is a tool for enhancing intuition.
Ooh, I like that.